All right. Greetings and welcome to Calling for Change, how and why to get involved in your community. My name is Erin Poor. I am a co-collaborator with Lincoln Calling, and I'm joined by my other co-collaborator, Ty and Brad. Hi, Ty.
Welcome,
Hey,
everyone. Oh, hey, Aaron. I'm Ty.
hey, hey,
I
Brad.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Brad Christian Salas with Civic Nebraska.
Great. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started today. Our first series, our first conversation in this series is all about exploring how to make change on the local level. Before we get into this, we're just going to chat a little bit about how we've come to this series and maybe a little bit about our personal missions, a little bit of background about ourselves that have led us to this collaboration. Ty, why don't you start?
Yeah. So, like the idea of kind of what led us to this series of calling for change, with combination of Lincoln Calling and Civic Nebraska, is kind of what sparked this all. Is the protests here, even at the local level, to even get the idea of what was happening at the local level, and then I guess how to keep that more sustainable change to make sure things actually change, and that once the protests go away, they just go away and nothing happens. But we are here to make sustainable change and to make a goal to get to August 3rd. So we started this series. For this first week, it's kind of to introduce you to the overview of kind of what is the city council, and ways to be involved at the local level. Then next week, we'll do like advocacy training, and then up to that, how you prepare your testimony before when you actually want to talk to the city council and sound and articulate well when you're standing in front of that council.
Great. Brad, talk to us about how you came to this series and how you came into civic engagement.
Yeah, so I came into this series. I think Ty reached out to my boss, John Cartier, and they're old friends. So Ty was interested in this, and I think we all got on a Zoom call or Google Hangouts and just kind of discuss what we could do around civic engagement, especially looking at the uh, city council level in Lincoln and what it means for people to really be able to advocate effectively through city government, and really to help them understand why there's that importance in city government and being able to advocate on a local level for the policies they want to see. And for me, I came into civic engagement because of my mom. I always say, but when I was a kid, whenever I would get in trouble, my punishment would always be to write essays on different civil rights leaders. So after doing a lot of essays, just kind of as I got older, I started actually appreciating and realized it wasn't even really a punishment. It was a gift she gave me by doing that, because it really made me care about being involved in my community and helping out my community, particularly the Black community, and just doing everything that I can do to be active and push for change that will make a difference in people's lives.
Wow. Okay, so I didn't know we were dropping knowledge yet, but I hope everybody's taking notes that if your child needs some disciplining, they should be writing essays about civil rights leaders. That's brilliant. Thank you to your mom, Brad.
Yeah, yep.
That's awesome. Let's see. I don't know. I have an arts organization background. I'm a trained art historian, and I was really inspired by the way that artists have been at the forefront of social change. And for the last 2 years, I've been hearing this quote in my head. The great, great leader Angela Davis was leading a talk in New York a couple years ago about jazz and gender and the lack of gender parity in jazz. And she said, music is at the forefront of social change. And I thought about that for a long time, and I thought about how Lincoln Calling is mostly a music platform, but music, art, education, and especially with what's been going on in the country of late, I thought, and Ty kind of came to us with this idea too, that we have to use this platform. We have to use our platforms for, for conversations, to share resources, to help empower our community to make the change that they want to see. So it's really awesome to be with you both here today, especially bringing your histories, your passions, your experiences, and your knowledges to this. We are so excited to jump into this new series, Calling for Change. And like Ty mentioned, we are going to roll through a bunch of topics over the course of this series. But we do hope that you, our community, our audience, shares with us the things that you would like to learn more about. If there is something that you want to learn about, whether it's a specific governing body or a particular process of making change locally that you've never engaged in before, that might feel opaque, confusing, then share that with us. We're probably confused too, but we can work together to find some answers. So we're super excited to bring in our first guest, but before we do, I'd like to make a formal land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement is something that we like to do before our Lincoln Calling programs, to acknowledge that we are here on this land, that this land has a very long history and a very long special relationship with many people. So I'd like to acknowledge that this conversation is taking place on the past, present, and future homelands of the Ponca, the Uzni Ponca, the Juwere and the Tuchi, the Umaha, the Dakota, Lakota, Hino, Noino, Ka, Tsisitas, and Sotahe peoples, as well as those of the relocated Ho-Chunk, Nimahahaki, and Baksoje peoples. We acknowledge that our coming together here does not usurp or counter any past, present, or future claims of Native peoples also to this space, and that it behooves us to know on whose lands we temporarily convene. I want to say thank you to all of the folks from those communities who are giving me grace as I stumble through those names. That is my goal, is to become more familiar with the indigenous names of the peoples who live on this land, who have lived on this land, and will always live on this land. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ty. Ty, you've known Councilman Bennie Shobe, our special guest today, for the longest, so why don't you give him an intro?
Yeah. Thank you. It's a great honor, actually, to be able to be the one introducing this man. So it's a great honor to introduce a man that inspired me to so much, to be our first guest on Calling for Change. This man personally is the reason I got involved at the local level, just kind of watching him and the way he moves, the way he acts, the way he interacts with the community. He served as president of the Lincoln chapter of NAACP. It's kind of, I got to pick his brain a couple of times at some of those meetings as he was a president. He's an adjunct professor at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, but teaches here in Lincoln, so he gets to stay here in his local community, but teaches for the University of Nebraska, Omaha, which is pretty cool. And he also co-hosts this Black Men's Monthly Breakfast, which has been on pause since COVID-19 hits, but that's always a great time to have like informal discussions with him and kind of pick his brain, especially like someone of his stature. With no further introduction is needed, Councilman Bennie Shobe is our guest today.
Welcome.
My head is swelling. Thank you, Ty.
All right. So, well, it's awesome. Now we are the Brady Bunch. Hello, everyone.
Wait.
Right. Well, it's so awesome to be here together. We do have a number of questions for you, which I know we shared ahead, and it's an ambitious list. We'll get through. We'll get through as much as we can, but we
Yeah.
also want to ask our audience to be dropping questions, whether you're watching with us on Facebook or YouTube. Feel free to send in your questions about the Lincoln City Council. We are here to demystify how this body works. So we'll start with our questions. Ty, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. I guess first question for you, Bennie, is what sparked your interest to get involved in your community? Tell us about your path to civic engagement.
That's a little harder and probably would take the whole hour, but I grew up in Kentucky. Bowling Green, Kentucky is home of the Western Kentucky University Hilltoppers. Go Big Red, a different version. And I finished a degree there and was teaching at the community college there and moved to Nebraska to work on a doctorate to further that degree and to give more chances. I'm a sociologist by training. Medical sociology and statistics are my background. But in Kentucky, in Bowling Green, I was involved in community activities. When I moved to Lincoln, I had no family or friends. The next thing to do was, okay, what's going on here in Lincoln? Let's get involved. One of the first weekends here, I went to something called a contra dance. I don't know if you guys have been to that or not. I saw it in the paper. I didn't know what it was. Let's go see what's going on there. And made about 5 or 10 new friends. And the more I got engaged with people in the community, the more I went to events, the more I found out about organizations that were trying to make change. Organizations that had good people, had good motives, had good missions, and had good lessons to teach me. So I joined lots of groups. I tried to make sure I went and did something new every week, and I met new people, and I fell in love with the community. After a few years of doing that, I'd met friends both in the private sector, the university sector, and in government. And I would hear my friends in the non-governmental sector saying, I don't understand how they did this, or I don't know why this happened. And I knew the answer. And I thought, well, maybe I could serve as a bridge between my groups so we could bring them all together. And I can answer some questions. And that's when we got involved with the Democratic Party. And then that kind of led to me saying, you know what, I think I'm ready to try this. I think I can add a different voice to the city council and just bring the voices of people that are not normally brought to the table and make them part of the conversation. And that was my desire, and that's what I keep trying to do every week. So what about the people that aren't in the room? What would they say about this?
Exactly.
Definitely. So kind of going off that and talking about joining those different organizations and all those different groups that you took part in, was there a specific organization prior to the city council or a role you had where you're like, this is how I can really affect change and really have power to make a difference in my community?
That's kind of like a Sophie's choice. Which one did I? You didn't ask about this, but which group did I like better? Which one? Yeah, I don't know. I think they all had their own effect in their own way. But I think the thing that helped the most was after a few years of doing things like with the Malone Center, with the NAACP, with the Indian Center, with Nebraskans for Peace, with the Asian Community Center, I applied for and was selected to be a member of the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights, which is a advisory committee to the mayor. And I served on that for about 5 years. And I think that's probably where I built stronger connections and was able to talk about discrimination in our community and actually changing laws and accessing the courts to address discrimination. I think that was probably where most bang for my buck.
Awesome.
Nice. So tell us about how, your particular passions or your current work has developed, and how did that lead you to the city council?
Well, I don't know how to, we did our land acknowledgement, and I appreciate you doing that. That was very wonderful. But I want to talk about my ancestors, mostly my mom and my dad, who were inspiring in that way. They taught me that I am blessed and have many opportunities. And then when I get other opportunities, I need to share that effort and try to help others. My dad and I talk about that quite often now. But what are you doing for everybody else? He follows me on Facebook. He's 80 and lives in Kentucky, and cyber stalks me on Facebook. And he goes, I saw you did this thing the other day. Did that really help anybody? And I have to go, well, yeah, Dad, it did. Who and how? And He still quizzes me on that to try to keep me honest. But I feel like I have to try. I've been given great opportunities and some access to resources and people, so I have to try to push the dial forward just a little bit. We're not going to accomplish it all today, but we just can't take our shoulder from the wheel. So I keep trying. Most of my days now is spent listening to people and asking questions and trying to figure out how we do that.
So your dad
Right.
helps humble you daily.
Yes.
That's good. It's always good to have someone help humble you.
Yeah, my dad. Yeah, he's an incredible guy.
Nice. Well, I think that's a really good segue to our focused conversation on the city council.
Okay. Good.
So, Councilman Shobe, can you tell us, kind of in a nutshell,
Yeah.
what does the Lincoln City Council do?
That's a really fun question. I've been spending. You did provide me with a question earlier. I was thinking, what do we do? And the easiest way I think to say it is, think about city government as two forms of government: an executive branch and a legislative branch. The mayor is the executive branch. She puts forward a budget. She manages the departments of the city. He makes sure that all the services of the community are met, all the needs of the community are met by services. And the city council is the legislative or representative branch. We have 4 council districts and 3 at-large council people for a total of 7. And our job is to be in the community, find out what the community members like, work with the mayor, sometimes encourage her to change her position on things or encourage her to go forward with things. We're supposed to be the voice of the public, helping to put checks and balances in place for city government. This is working well, let's do more of that. This is not working, let's stop doing that.
Definitely. So you were saying you're really that in between role almost, and that voice for the people. So how, when we're thinking about what is actually just the voice of the people turning into a law or something with the power of the city government behind it, can you talk a little bit about that process and like what are the differences between like an ordinance, a resolution, all those different things?
Yeah, that's a little bit harder question because I was looking at Monday's agenda, which was, if you got a chance to spend time with us on Monday's meeting that lasted until 12:20, from 3 to 12:20, we had a 9-page agenda, and it's covered with ordinances and resolutions. I tell people that ordinances are more permanent. They're more like guidepost rules and laws that are written into our city code. We're a charter form of city. We have city ordinances and municipal codes, and an ordinance is the guidepost. Here are the rules. These are the parameters we need to work within. So the ordinances help establish that and put real specific language into what needs to be done and how. Resolutions are more instructions on how to work within those. One of our resolutions last week was the appointment of Johansi Christie as city attorney. Now, an ordinance would define what the city attorney does and where he goes and his powers and parameters. That will be an ordinance. The resolution says appoint him to this job. So we don't need to establish rules or regulations. We just need to do this thing. It's instructions on what to do. So resolutions are not really weaker than ordinances. They're just more, we want you to do this one thing. We resolve to do this. This is our will and our wishes. Go do it. Ordinances, we want to change something. Here are the new rules we need to work within.
Okay. No, that makes a lot more sense. Before, it's really hard to tell that difference between the two.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I had no idea.
We kind of flex them in like the section on page, hang on, 5 is ordinances on 3rd reading and related resolutions. So here are the rules, the ordinances, and here are the resolutions you're supposed to follow after the ordinances are in place. Ordinances and related resolutions. And we have a whole public hearing on resolution sections. And then it gets a little confusing. And there are lots of times when I will say, wait, what? What are we doing here now? I want to make sure I understand what's going on. And we all do that. There are all 7 of us will stop for a second. I don't really understand what we just did here. Can we stop for a minute? This is important, and we have the potential to affect the lives of 300,000 people in Lincoln. Sometimes we just take a minute and take a deep breath and pause for a second. I'm always afraid of the unintended consequences of our actions. And so I really like to slow down just a little bit.
Definitely.
I'll
Well,
stop talking now. Next.
coming off of that, I just
Yeah.
this wasn't one of the questions we had necessarily before, but with it being that just kind of confusing, like everyone on this call is
Right.
highly civically engaged, and we needed help working through that. You said you need help working through that sometimes. Like, what can we do as we move forward with this show to really best help people understand all those different things?
That's a hard question. Where do you start to get the knowledge to do it? That's kind of what I heard you say. It's not what you said, but that's the way I interpret it. It's hard to say where you should start. I talked about being on a board and a commission. I really want to stress that I encourage people to look at our boards and commissions and see where your passion is and try to join one of those. That would be really helpful to get more voices in there. Ask questions. That's a good. Ask how, or what do I want to do? Or there are lots of groups, and I wanted to do a screen share on email. We talked about that briefly. I get about 50 to 60 emails a day, and about half of them are people saying, "I wish you'd done this differently," or "Would you consider doing this?" From banning paper drinking straws to taking down cell phone towers because they cause cancer. I get a wide gamut of people asking to do things, and then I usually go to a department head or a chair and say, "Have we ever tried this before? Has someone talked about this before? Where can I find some history about this?" And then they'll hand me a research paper, or they'll say we haven't, and I'll say, "Can you write up something for me to read?" So it's a lot of research, a lot of asking questions. I encourage you to find other people who've already done it. Most of the things that we look at are not new, and we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to figure out, has someone done it before? What was successful? What was not successful? And let's avoid the not successful and go forward with the rest of it.
Good question, Brad.
Yeah, it's good. I don't think I answered it well. I don't know where to. Yeah.
No, I liked it. It was like, you want to learn more, you got to dive deeper. You got to get on those commissions. You got to do those task forces. I mean, isn't that what we're trying to do? So that was a good answer.
Great answer. Yeah.
I'm gonna steal my talking stick for a little bit longer. Ty was talking about all the NAACP. Much like him, I showed up one week and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And came to 3 or 4 meetings. A couple meetings later, I was the secretary. A couple months later, I was the vice president. And then a couple years after that, I was the president. And that was not what I had in mind. But I showed up and helped them fold chairs and sweep up after the meeting. And then within a couple years, I knew everything they knew, and I was in charge. I encourage you to find a group that's your passion, that you really feel good about, and join the group. Be a follower for a while, but you'll be put in charge before you know it.
Yeah,
I like
for sure.
that advice.
I mean,
it's great advice.
Yeah, that's real similar to what happened for me. I just started volunteering and just stayed involved.
Before you know it, you're here. You can do this. I'm going to take a nap. And I'm wait, what?
Yeah, that's kind of how I ended up here on the board of directors for Lincoln Calling. Like getting involved.
And our groups are changing. We have a lot of the old guard that are ready to step aside, and we need lots of passionate people. We just need to get them all connected.
Be the bridge.
Yes.
All right. Kind of keep going with on the resolution and ordinance question. So we understand how the council receives the requests from other city departments to consider different ordinances and resolutions, but are there typical departments that send ordinances and resolution your way? And like, who actually drafts those ordinances or resolutions that come your way?
Yes, that's great. The city attorney does most of the drafting.
Okay.
In their office, there's a staff of lawyers in the city attorney's office, and they all have specialty areas, and they all work within their areas to help us do things. I meant to count how many different departments we have. I don't have that spreadsheet handy, but each one of the spreadsheets, each one of the offices or departments could could request an ordinance be put on the agenda. Most often, ordinances are put on the agenda to address something to change, something new. We do get requests from the community, and someone will say, "Hey, Benny, my first week on the council, Councilwoman Cindy Lamb said I would love to talk about a school zone on North 84th Street. Would you be willing to work with me on that?" And we sat down and had a conversation and a coffee, and we drafted a resolution saying we wanted to change the way school zones were done. And then what I would always try to do is talk with the other council people. While we all come from different backgrounds, different economic strata, we're the council, like a council of people that should get together and make decisions jointly. And we try our best to work on those resolutions and ordinances and work out any differences ahead of time so our votes are unanimous. We really like and treasure working out the problems behind the scenes and coming forward with a unanimous vote. Our agenda will come out in the morning and we'll all call each other and talk about items that are confusing, who introduced what. And we're always kind of I'm working on a couple of resolutions now that I will introduce in the next couple of weeks to change some things that are the way we do things. And I'll talk with all my council people first. They'll see the first draft. I'll ask them, do they have any questions? They'll give me good advice and to change this and not do that. And we'll work together. People from the community ask us to do things, and then departments, mostly when departments do it, it's because something's broken or something's wrong, and they'll say, we weren't paying attention, and this says you should always turn counterclockwise, and it really doesn't matter. Can we take out the counter and put in just should turn period? Those are usually text amendments, and they're just corrections to things. I grew up in Kentucky, and it was famously noted that you're not allowed to drive your car downtown because it will scare the horses. And that is still a law that's on the books, and we just leave it there because it's fun. You're not allowed to be downtown with your car. We find lots of little things like that where we passed a law and it didn't do what we thought it would do. So fix that.
My interpretation of what you're saying is I could call up my council member from my district and sit with them for coffee and possibly create my own resolution with my council member.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily have to come from
you go.
It doesn't have to necessarily come from a city department or like an attorney. It can come from me as a normal citizen of Lincoln.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I want to encourage that. But I also want to say is, you'll come to me and you say, I want Lincoln to be more like Venice, and we flood all the streets and make canals out of them. Would you introduce a resolution to flood all the Lincoln streets? I would say, I've never thought about that. I will let me go talk with some people and see if we can do that. And then, and then we'll do some research and see if it's doable. But yeah, you should always, if you have an idea, send us something and let us talk about it. There's a line there where, and I struggle with this. I hear this from community members all the time. You're not listening to me because you didn't do exactly as I told you. And there's a small line there between, yes, I was listening and I talked with the fellow city councils, and we just can't do that right now. We did hear you and we did discuss it, but we just because we didn't do it doesn't mean we didn't hear you.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic to keep diving deeper into, especially as a lot of folks are really trying to figure out, what are the channels that they should be navigating to try and affect change, especially on the city level, on the local level. And you mentioned that there is obviously the departments that are putting forth ordinances and resolutions, but that citizen to council person relationship is also an important thing. But I'm curious too, we are each individual people. Mm-hmm. We hold our individual beliefs. Would it be more effective for a group of people to come forward and identify somehow and say, hey, we are the so-and-so group. We'd like to have some time with you, and then go and kind of say, hey, we represent a larger group and we'd like you to work with us on this particular resolution or this particular ordinance. Is that kind of a method that would be effective?
Short answer, yes, it would be effective at getting the issue to become part of the conversation. One of the discussions we have regularly as council people we get a lot of email from people who are passionate about something. And our job is kind of to listen to what they have to say and be empathetic to the greater city. Sometimes the things that people want are very good short term, but not very good long term, or it's just very difficult. I've heard people say, I sent you 7 emails. Why didn't you listen? And my answer is, you said the same thing 7 times. It's not a cumulative add up effect. Just because you said it a bunch of times or you had 30 people show up doesn't mean it's going to automatically happen. That'll start the process and there'll be a conversation, but a large group of people, is it a majority of our city? What I would love to see is when people have issues they're passionate about, go work with neighborhood associations, other nonprofits, and build a critical mass in our community. Most of the things that we want to see change, we all agree on. We just kind of work in a fragmented manner. I don't want to discourage you from developing a group of like-minded people and addressing the city council. It's just not an automatic. If I show up with 30 people, you're going to do exactly what I told you to do the next day. That probably won't happen that way. But it's a good start.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
with that, what thing usually seems like it ends up being the barrier? Is it just like when people have like the Venice type idea you're saying, where it's just like it can't happen, or does it end up being like not enough money to do this idea? What's usually that barrier for when people are bringing those ideas for resolutions and ordinances and those things?
Well, I'm not going to start with money. Money is always the barrier, but I'm not going to start there. What I'm going to start with is, if you said no matter what an individual or resident of our community wants, there's almost an equal number of people that do not want to see that. And it happens quite often when someone says something, or they get their picture in the paper, or they're at city council and they make a statement. Within a few hours, we'll get a number of people say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You better not do that. I will make sure you don't get reelected. I will, whatever way they have of expressing that they're passionately opposed to it. So there are times when we always have to weigh how well will this benefit the city versus and make people happy, or how well does this benefit the city and really make people angry. The other part of that is there's just a limited amount of money. Most of the funds that we get a lot of our funds from property taxes, but then there are lots of grants, fees, services, foundations, and almost all the money comes with restrictions. Here's this money, but you can only spend it here. Or another pile of money can only be spent on these things, even though you don't have any of those things to do right now. We don't have a project where we need to do this, but this money can only be spent on that project. There are state laws, federal laws, and local laws that restrict how we can use the money. So the money that we can use the money in the general fund is only a small portion of our budget. Most of the city funds most of the city services are funded by grants, aids, bond sales, fees, and other things. And they all have restrictions on how you can use them. So if somebody comes up with a good idea, it's like, okay, I'm sorry, we weren't going to do too many issues, but we talked at the city council a few months ago about the roundabout at 14th and Old Cheney. That's called a capital improvement project. We call that part of the CIP. And we have CIP projects on the books ready to go in all 4 quadrants of the city. And we can use highway tax, wheel tax, impact fees, but those are all restricted to those districts. They can't be used outside the geographic region where they are. And we don't have enough to do this project yet. We're still saving for it. And that money has to stay there. It can't go anywhere else. So we have a large pot of money designed to do this one thing, but it's not enough, and we're waiting to get something else more in. That happens more often than not. We have a big project and we're just waiting for it to be funded.
Well, this conversation about funding is probably a good segue to kind of talk about what's going on in the city council right now, specifically the city budget. So could you tell us a little bit about the city budget?
Yes, the city budget is a crazy thing. So we have lots of one of the things that started back, I think, before Mayor Beitler became mayor and before Mayor Gaylord Baird, they do a survey, a random sample of Lincolnites, and ask them what they want done and where they want to do. It's a quality of life survey. And they ask questions about, do you need more parks, less parks, more roads, less roads? Roads are always a big concern. People want more drivable roads. But we do an assessment of the city's needs based on what the residents want, and then based on the services we're currently providing, whether they should be increased or decreased. And then each one of the departments tries to look at the services they provide, the staffing needs they have, the resources they need, and they present to the mayor a number that they need to do what we, the community, want done for 1 more or 2 more years. We are doing a biennial budget. We moved to 2-year budgets a few budgets ago. This year, since we have an emergency in our community, kind of looking at a 1-year budget, and then we're going to stop and reevaluate. We always do that anyway. We schedule things. We do what we're going to spend this year, what we're going to spend next year, and then at the end of the first year, we stop to see where we are. But most of the things that are in our budget are to maintain services that the community has said it wants, and to add a few things that it said it would like to have. Improvements on existing infrastructure. We spend a lot of money trying to maintain the things we have so they don't become in more disarray. This year we'll put off a few of those things because we don't have the money, because of the virus, the economy changed. And we hope that it will come back and we can go back to maintenance, repair, and replacement. Not a lot of growth.
Got it. Well, that's a helpful explanation. It's still, I mean, obviously it's a huge process. Like you said, there's lots of moving parts.
Starts in January, and we meet 3 or 4 times a week for January and a little bit of February, and then we take some time off, and then we come back to it in late June, early July, and we talk about it almost every day. There's a conversation about a budget item. Yeah.
So with that, and it being like that 2-year time period, is there a lot of flexibility or just very little flexibility with the budget when you're dealing with it on just kind of like the world right now looking totally different than it looked in January or anyone thought it would look?
Yeah.
How much kind of flexibility does the city council have to just change those priorities and those things that were, okay, everybody said this is what we want, to, okay, everything is totally different now?
Yeah, excuse me, October, November last year, I was thinking, this is great. I'm really passionate about aging partners. I'm really passionate about talking about affordable housing. I'm really passionate about 4 or 5 other things. The economy's great. The budget's going to be a piece of cake. I can spend money like crazy. And then we all got locked down from COVID, and then became, okay, I just don't want you to cut funding for my pet project. Can you just not cut it? Can we just hold it where it was? To, wow, we need to replace all the vans for this agency. They need to hold on to those for 1 or 2 more years. We can't afford to. I know they've got 200,000 miles on them, but we need them to stay together for a little bit longer. So it becomes that, what can we live without? Just like your own personal budget. What can we live without? What do we really need? What do we, and we need to replace the hot water heater because the bottom just fell out of it. So it's a lot of juggling like that, looking at what we really need and can live without and not live without.
So why us as Lincoln residents? Why should we care about the budget?
Well, as Aaron was saying earlier, I think Aaron said this, there's so much diversity in our community. And that's diversity of thought, diversity of income, diversity across the boards. And each one of us, with love and affection, Lincolnites, think we're an expert on what the city needs. So you need to advocate for the things that you think are important and valuable, while being empathetic to everyone else in the community that thinks theirs is more important and more valuable than yours. And I want us as a community to find that middle ground where you get a little bit of what you want, I get a little bit of what I want. We both give up a little bit what we want, and we move forward as a community. I fear more often than not, we become so locked in and polarized on, I want all of mine, screw you. that nobody gets anything. And so we talked earlier about, I'm a big fan of social capital. You guys familiar with the idea of social capital? I want us to, it's more about, I do something nice for you and you kind of owe me now. We build a relationship. I helped you move. So when I move in 2 years, now you have to help me. Or I came, you had a flat tire, I came and picked you up. I didn't take any money, no cash. Now you kind of, we have a relationship. It's a barter. It's a sharing exchange. And we're all connected because of those things. I want our community to build a little bit more social capital where I see that you have a need and I want to help you with that need. And that means I need to come with you to city council and advocate for this one thing. Or vice versa. You know, I know you don't care about puppies, but I really want to do something in the Humane Society. Can you invite you and your friends to come down and just be in the room with me and be support? And if we can build those bridges and work on that social capital and work together, we can, I think the change will come a little easier. I think if Lincolnites find their friends, your question was, why should Lincolnites care? If we work together and build a bridge and build some cooperation and social capital, we can do a lot more.
That's really good to keep in mind. And I want to kind of think a little bit too about the ways in which residents, citizens do get involved with this process. And there are times for public comment. You mentioned earlier that you all had, gosh, how many hours was it? From 3 p.m. to midnight?
Yeah,
we started
at 1 o'clock with a budget meeting. We were all in our chairs about 1:45, and we left about 12:15.
So it was like a 12-hour day for you all in meeting.
It was fun. I actually, it's tiring, and I'm still recovering a little bit from it, honestly, but I'm an elected representative for the city of Lincoln, and not everybody can come to the council, and I'm not getting out in the community as much as I used to, but the public needs a chance to tell us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And they need a chance to voice their opinion, and I like hearing those things. Sometimes they're painful, and I don't want to hear them, but they need to be part of the conversation. We need to have the public's voice. It's our conscience. It tells us when we're doing right or doing wrong.
Absolutely. So then thinking forward about the budget process, I know that August 3rd is the date that has been set aside for public comment on the budget. So how does this public comment session actually impact the council decisions on approving or making changes to the budget?
Well, at this point, we have 2 more meetings, I think, scheduled between now and then when we can actually make other changes. And a last meeting, there was a conversation about pulling some money out of the reserve fund to fill some other gaps to increase some of the spending. And we'll have that conversation a couple more times. And then there'll be chances for us to advocate for our own little passions again. But the public comment portion, honestly, it's at that point when you agree or disagree, or you plant seeds for the future. At that point, it'll be almost completed, and there won't be a chance to make many more changes. We will get more data from the treasurer, from the finance director, about where our tax receipts are, and if we're on target, or if we have more money than we thought, or if we have less money than we thought. There might be more cuts if the revenue streams are lower than we thought. But at that point, we're just kind of almost done.
Okay, so residents should probably be paying attention throughout the entire process and taking advantage of all of those opportunities for public comment and going throughout the year to make your positions known, rather than just always waiting till that final meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do publish them on the web. I do talk to my friends in the neighborhood. So, this is what we're talking about. Is there something you're interested in? And most of the feedback I hear, there are a few hot button or hot topic issues, but I hear things like you need to ban plastic grocery bags. Okay, that's not really related to the budget. We'll talk about it, but it's not really. What about spending? Where do you want us to spend money? Then it's always roads. We're never paving enough roads. Lincolnites seem to hate flashing yellow lights too. You get lots of hate flashing yellow lights. Uh,
Awesome.
but yeah,
Well,
yeah, most of the things that Lincolnites are really passionate about are not related to the budget. They're related more to quality of life things.
mm,
Uh,
They or we replace part of the budget with the Lincoln Transportation Utilities is to replace 7 miles of water line every year. So every year we add 7 new miles. We would take out old stuff that's been there hundreds of years and replace it with new pipes. We're trying to replace all of them. It'll take us about a few decades to get it all done, but we do that every year. I get a phone call from somebody saying my street is torn up. I can't get to my house because you guys are replacing the water line. I'm thinking this is something we need to do. Okay, how do I make this a positive?
yeah.
So there are little things like that where my job is to be empathetic, listen to what the community says, report to my fellow city council people, and then find a way to make it easier for them.
Definitely.
So you've talked about advocating. So back up a little bit. So advocating in the chamber. So like, I guess I would like to know, what are your thoughts and reflections kind of local movement that's happening now in our city? Like the Black Lives Matter movement and like trying to have a voice for Black people and others, and how's it intersecting kind of with your role that you're in? You can
It's very difficult for me. It's very difficult. I can see that we do have lots of people email us regularly and speak passionately about issues of structural inequality and institutional racism. And I agree with them on most of that on the really high level of things. But there's a little bit of a lack of understanding what's happening in Lincoln. And as we talked about, do a little bit more homework would be helpful to us. There are lots of people that come before the city council in recent days and discussed the city council increasing the funding for education in schools. And the Lincoln City Council does not fund education in schools in Lincoln and Lancaster County. The Lincoln School Board does all the funding. They have taxing authority and they do their own funding. Even if we were to pull funds from some other agency, we couldn't ship them to schools. But at some point, I think we'll start having conversations, and then we can talk about the things that we can do and how we as a society can address those issues. But my job now is just to listen and make sure I understand what everybody's saying.
Thank you.
For sure. And like how you're saying is to listen, understand what everybody's saying. And we do have a lot of people fired up right now in the community about Black Lives Matter, and just at the bigger, as you were saying, like systemic racism that we see in systems all across our country. So when you listen, as someone's preparing a testimony or preparing to reach out to you these issues, do you have some tips for them or best way for them to prepare themselves to talk to you or talk to the council about the issue?
That's a really hard question, and it's a little bit more judgmental than I'm comfortable saying. I want to talk about there are 7 council people, and we all bring our own personalities, our own personal histories, our own background and baggage to the system. I can tell you what works for me, but that might not work for other council people. And we need a unified voice to make that change. But having said that, I'm always troubled when people compare Lincoln to other cities in our nation. Lincoln is not Chicago or Portland or St. Louis or Newark, New Jersey. The population is very different. The demographic breakdown is very different. And our history is very different. One of the things that I do take pride in saying is Lincoln has had a community policing program since the 70s, where police work in the communities, they become community members. And I think many of the more challenging cities in our nation would like to be more like Lincoln than Lincoln changing, but we haven't had a chance to have that conversation yet. One of the things I would like people to know is that Lincoln Police Department respond to about 400 calls from the community every day. That's where a person finds himself in a hard or difficult situation, and they call the police, and then we call mental health counselors or homeless counselors or the food bank. One of my favorite stories is a gentleman came to night court about in May of last year, and a policeman brought him. He'd been arrested for shoplifting at a local market, but he had outstanding warrants, which meant he would have to go to jail and not get released. The policeman brought him to night court first, got his warrants dismissed before he took him in for booking for the most recent charge. That meant he didn't have to go to jail that night. He could be released and go home. But so that policeman was trying to make sure that man who was accused of a crime still didn't have the full punishment. He used the system to help that individual. And that is more the rule in Lincoln than the exception.
Benny, we are almost out of time, and I wanted to move to a couple of questions from our
Are there
audience.
questions?
Yes. So one question that we have from Harriet is, how does the open meetings law play into conversations with other council members?
Okay, that's a little hard. I'm not sure what you're asking. The open meetings law is kind of designed so we don't conspire to do things that aren't public. And so is that the direction you're going, Harriet? I'm not sure. Let me see if I can do this better. We understand that if we have more than 4 city council people in one location at an unannounced meeting, that would be a quorum. So we just don't show up. We break up, somebody leaves. I have dinner with Roy a couple times a month. I have coffee with other council people and lunches, and we sit and we talk about the issues one-on-one or 3 at a time. More than 3 is a quorum, and it could be considered, especially if we're talking about taking action on something, an inappropriate meeting. We're very conscious of that and make sure it doesn't happen. But there are times when we go to banquets or events that are not ours. We didn't plan them, but we're supporting the community. That's not really a meeting of the city council. And if we are going to have some meeting like that, we will announce it 7 days in advance. It'll be a public meeting. The public can come and have lunch with us if we're doing that. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
I think it did. That was clarifying for me. I mean, I see that on lots of the meeting agendas, and I was curious, how far that was applied. So that makes sense.
I think there was a history of people, the old backroom deals we've heard so much about, and city council people cutting a deal or a bargain with somebody, and it's an effort to avoid that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
More transparency.
Great. And Harriet is happy with that answer. Okay, last question from our audience that we have time for is, tell us about the petition process. Does the city have a petition process?
I'm not as well versed in that as most. We do have a petition process. If the public decides that they want an issue or don't like an issue, they can do a ballot initiative where they get signatures on a ballot. And there's some fancy math that you need to talk with the election commissioner about, and the accountability disclosure, because you have to have a number of signatures is based on the number of votes cast in an election for a certain year, and it changes quite often. Every election cycle, the number of signatures needed changes. And if probably the most recent version was a few years back, I think 2012 or 2008, there was a fairness ordinance that became before the city council and passed and became city law. And several community groups banded together and did a ballot initiative drive to have that put on a ballot to a vote of the people. And once that drive is done and petitions are signed and is certified by the election commissioner, the city council has to pick a date and an election, put that on the ballot for the people to vote for it. That was the last time it was done. We sometimes vote on things like bonding issues. Those are just kind of special elections. They're not really driven by ballot initiatives or signature drives. We tend to see those more on the state level, with Medicare, medical marijuana. A few years ago, there was a ballot initiative to end affirmative action in Nebraska, which passed. So
Can you reverse a ballot initiative, or can you just start a new one on the same topic, or are there any limitations for that?
I did not go to law school. I am not a lawyer. I have talked to a few lawyers about that, and I think it's more considered the will of the people. If the people put forth a ballot initiative and it passes, you could pass a new law to undermine the ballot initiative, but that would be pretty dirty pool, wouldn't it?
Well, unless the sentiment has changed,
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Right.
Yeah, usually, what I thought you were saying is the ballot initiative just passed. I hate it. I'm going to pass a law to undermine it. I think that wouldn't be as successful, but yes.
That makes sense.
Going back to the fairness ordinance, that was a very passionate issue, but the Supreme Court has ruled, and part of that is null and void now. So and that's one of the conversations the council's been having for the last few weeks. What do we do to be in compliance with Supreme Court ruling while respecting all the wishes of the community? We're still working on that.
Of course. Well, this has been a very informative hour. Brad, Ty, are you feeling more informed?
Oh,
Definitely.
Awesome. Bennie, we're super grateful for the time that you've given to us, but we just want to ask you, is there anything else you'd like to share with our community members?
Yeah, I want to go back to that advocating and wanting issues things. Yes, I want to encourage people to talk with your council members, send us emails, tell us when you're passionate about things, and we want to work on it. We want to work with you. We want to make our community better for everyone. But I also want you to keep in mind some empathy for others. Think about the rest of our community, and also realize it takes a lot of time to change things. Things just because you have a great passionate idea today, it might take several years before we can actually make it happen. But don't give up. Keep telling us, keep talking to us, keep engaging us.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Councilman Shobe. We're extremely grateful for all of the time that you've given to us, and especially for all of the knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for what you do. I think an educated populace makes our community better.
Definitely.
The watchfulness
Thank you
of the
for joining
citizen
us.
You say it. Say it again with the watchfulness of the citizen. Yes.
is the salvation of the state.
Like she said.
cool.
For the city.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll
guys.
see you in the chambers.
Next Monday is a late night meeting and also a public comment meeting. So I think it starts at 5:30 and we'll have public comment after the agenda's over with.
All right. We'll see you there.
If you go to the website, you can send emails to all the council people individually or as a group under packet, city council packet. And one email gets to all of us.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye, Bennie. So that was a great conversation. I'm feeling super informed. I've been trying to go to these city council meetings recently and still feeling like I had no idea what was going on. So that was really informative. What about you guys?
Oh yeah. Well, even just pieces like when he was discussing the budget and how by that last meeting it's almost at the point where it's set. So that, I mean, I think lets everyone know, like when they're thinking about advocacy and things like that, they really need to be tuned in, and just it's not enough to focus on issues for a short period of time, but got to be prepared to be invested in issues over the long haul so that you can really affect change and make a difference.
Yeah, interviewing him was great. Just having this conversation with him was great. Just learned so much, kind of like I already knew, but just knowing, like, talking about the issues, and like how to promote sustainable change. And he just kept reiterating that, like, you have to keep working at it. You cannot just say something on social media one time or say something to a friend and just hope that that change is going to happen just because you're angry. But no, you have to work at it. You have to keep picking at it and picking at it. Very tedious process, but then the change will happen. Like I love that he kept stressing that. So it was great. I'm fired up
Absolutely.
right now.
All right, you should go to that website and write some emails, Ty.
I definitely am. You know, it's like, you should have told me I could send one email to all of them at one time. Oh man, you shouldn't have let me know that.
It's super slick. Yeah, that part of the website. I mean, okay, I'm not trying to throw any shade at the Lincoln City website right now. Looks a little dated, but that part of the website where you can just like click this box and all of your council members and the whole city are selected, and then you can write one message and it goes to everybody. That's a cool little feature. Okay, so we have grown in our knowledge about the city council. Of course, there's so much more work to do. We are thinking about this budget process right now and the different opportunities that the public has a chance to converse, or at least to share their opinions with the city council. So we're thinking about that, and that's going to help us create our next conversation. So next week's conversation is all about building your testimonial. How can you prepare to stand before these elected bodies and to give a compelling testimony, basically. So we will see you all back here. There's going to be a couple new faces. Brad and Ty and I will not be on the next conversation. We'll have other folks from Lincoln Calling, from Civic Nebraska, be a part of this conversation, as well as some folks from other organizations across the city. And we'll be thinking about how to present that testimonial. Anything else you all want to say before we sign off for today?
Yeah, just get involved. Like, get involved in your community. Find someone who's probably already doing what you want to do and pick their brains, or watch the way they move, watch the way they act, and just kind of pick up and take that as like your unofficial mentor, and just get involved at the local level. And thanks for everyone who tuned in today to our conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I would just second what Ty said, and just never forget how long change can take and how hard of work it is, but that it's worth it. So just keep pushing, keep working, keep being involved, advocating, voting, all those good things.
Absolutely. And we invite all of our audience members here too to ask us questions. What do you want to know? If there are topics that are still a bit mystifying for you regarding various official bodies or procedures, then that's probably a shared opinion. So let's keep exploring together. Share with us what you'd like to know, and keep tuning in. And we will keep bringing you this series. So thank you to everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.